Welcome back to Bland Gaming, the most boring and technically inept channel on the internet. I'm your host, Deeb, and I just got my butt kicked by an 8-year-old girl. So Mrs. Bland Gaming is out, she's out spending some time with her friends, and it's very important that she do that. She doesn't get the chance to do that very much. So after work tonight, I'm in charge of, getting dinner and cleaning up and getting the kids off to bed. And my 8-year-old, she threw quite the fit at bedtime tonight. 8 years old. Anyway, so I've been talking to my doctor about trying to drink less during the week, but after that fit, and the fact that, I know there's a certain expectation that you all have when you tune into Bland Gaming, that there has to be a drink of the day. So today, it's a big, huge goblet of Chardonnay here. See if I can gather my wits and my nerves and make my sanity roll so that we can review Delta Green. All right, so let's talk about the first version of Delta Green. Let's also talk about the fact that my plan of using a phone holder is probably not going to work because it looks like I was going to hold it vertical like that. I don't think we're going to make that. So let's go back to caveman version here. All right. So move our George R.R. Martin book out of the way. So this is where Delta Green started. What is Delta Green? Delta Green originally was a source book that came out in the 90s for Call of Cthulhu. Now, if any of you have ever watched my channel before, you know that I love Lovecraft. I love Lovecraft. I love the game Call of Cthulhu. I love the books. I love the settings. I love the board games. I love everything about it. So one of the things that's great about Lovecraft is I actually have always preferred the setting of the 1920s. Lovecraft in his writings, the whole point of his writings were that these evil, malevolent, occult forces were not even plotting against, they're plotting despite humanity. We were so insignificant in the entire cosmic universe of everything going on that there was all of this great cosmic evil that was going on in the background and was basically possibly going to destroy humanity. Some of it malevolently, intentionally, and some of it just kind of like they just don't care that we're even here. We're like ants to them. Anyway, the entire point of Lovecraft's writings is that mankind is so insignificant that even to know what's going on in the universe, to know, to even confront one of these entities of infinite and timeless power, it could actually drive you mad. And I'll get to that really because madness is a huge part of Delta Green. Here's my point, though. In Call of Cthulhu, it took place in the 20s because Lovecraft wrote most of these stories himself in the late 20s, early 30s, before his early death in his 40s. He died just before World War II. Anyway, so the original game was set in the 20s, and it had this crackling fire creepiness to it because think about the type of setting in the 20s. You have old rustic farmhouses, you have creepy, creaky hotels and stuff in downtown Boston and whatnot. I mean, you have libraries. There's all sorts of it's ideal for such a good horror setting. The other thing that really helped it too was that Lovecraft's main antagonists in his books were from academia. He really is the guy that pioneered the idea of the adventurer archaeologist, which later inspired characters like Indiana Jones. So all of Lovecraft's heroes and his antagonists are all intellectual type heroes. Yeah, there is some life and limb type of stuff that goes on, but he really, it was, the most powerful character in all of his books was a librarian who actually got his hands on the Necronomicon. My friends make fun of me consistently, and I know one of them subscribes to my channel. I know he's laughing right now because he always tells me, Deeb, say Necronomicon, and I always screw it up and everything. But anyway, so if you're watching Fish Sticks, shut up. Anyway, so most powerful character in his universe was this librarian who comes across this accursed book, and then when this godlike entity that had, merged with a local wizard, and actually he'd sacrificed his daughter to her, and this creature started stomping through the countryside in rural Massachusetts and killing people. It was these three professors that got together and were able to figure out a dispel. They were able to, figure out how to banish the creature and whatnot. So that's the Dunwich Horror, by the way. It's one of the greatest, most epic Lovecraftian short stories. You need to read it if you haven't read it. But anyway, so then Call of Cthulhu came out, and they tried to adapt a lot of their... Back in the late 80s, early 90s when I was playing it, they tried to adapt some of their story arcs to modern adventures. And, in the 90s, it just didn't work as well. You had access to machine guns and technology and computers, and there was photography, things like that you just didn't. It took away a lot of the mystery and a lot of the fear of it. The other thing too is that it was much harder to get the ragtag group of characters together in a 90s setting than it was in the 1928 setting. In the 1928 setting, most of my adventures, the adventure hook all was around a university. So even though one of the characters might be a private eye, he might be related to somebody who, taught at Miskatonic, what have you. Anyway, so with the, so they call it Cthulhu now, and it wasn't as successful. Oh my God, this is like a 7-minute intro, and I apologize. I'm not being very streamlined today. But did I tell you guys I got my butt kicked by an 8-year-old? Anyway, so so I loved Call of Cthulhu, but I really didn't get too terribly excited about the about Cthulhu Now. Then this book came out. Now this book here is one of the original published ones. Here's the bad news: you can't find this book anywhere right now, and it is amazing. I think the last time I saw it, I think it was on eBay for like over 150, 200 bucks. You can't find this anywhere. Here's the amazing, awesome, good news for you people. This book here, this actual source book for Call of Cthulhu, is being remade for the new Delta Green, and it's getting ready to open on Kickstarter right now. I'm not going to buy it because I already own this book, and this book has everything that's in it. There's some updated rules, and there's some other stuff in it, but anyway, this book here was what I first bought and got me into Delta Green. The idea behind Delta Green is that the characters play employees of several federal agencies that are aware of the occult and of the presence of the occult, the presence of the Cthulhu mythos, and the inherent threat that it faces humanity. And so the players are part of this secret organization where, even though they may be a DEA agent by day, they're a secret member of Delta Green, which mobilizes them in these little cells, activates them to go out and to oppose these occult threats. And it is an amazing idea. It works really well. And this was their first book. This first book here used the Call of Cthulhu rules, so it's really just a source book, and it is just filled with lore. As you can also see, it's written by, I think, Dennis Detmiller and Adam Scott Glancy, John Tynes. And these guys, I think Dennis Detmiller did a lot of the illustrations, and he still does a lot of the illustrations himself, and it's moody, and it's creepy. And what's really cool about this book is it gives you a whole bunch of background about what happened since the 1928 raid on Innsmouth, in which the Deep Ones had been breeding with a local population, and that was where the United States government first becomes aware of the presence of the Cthulhu mythos, and that happened in 1928. So it gives a big history about what has happened since then. all through World War II. The Carotechnia is that's mentioned back here. This is the remnants, the remainder of the occult-based Nazi group, and they fled to South America and everything. This book here, it covers adventures taking place in the 90s. Like I said, this is currently going to go on Kickstarter for a current source book. Then they came out with a second book. This book is Delta Green Countdown. You can't even find this anywhere. This, and I have a copy. I bought this years ago. I think I got this when I was in college. But this one here covers, I don't want to give out too many spoilers, but it covers a conspiracy that's going on within the British Isles, which is genuinely creepy and really cool. And then it also covers, there's a lot of stuff in here about Pisces, which is the British version of Delta Green. And then I think they're called the GRU-7, which is the Soviet version of Delta Green, where they're their own little occult thing. But anyway, these are the old books. Let's not talk about this, okay? I do want you to keep this one in mind. I really recommend backing it on Kickstarter if you're interested in Delta Green. This is what you buy nowadays, and this is really, really well done. So this is, I bought this two set here, the Agent's Handbook and the Handler's Guide. The Handler is the term for the GM in this. And you buy both of them in this nice hardback cover. It's got this beautiful, moody art. And it is, this is about $100, I think. It's about like $80, $100 you can get on Amazon. Dennis Detwiller still does a lot of the art in it. And this one covers the Cthulhu mythos up until what's been going on with Delta Green up until modern times, till about, I think, 2016, 2017. So, what does this game do? Think of this game, this is not like Hellboy. This is not like Men in Black. This is more like, it reminds me of the X-Files, obviously, with a much darker tone to it. It reminds me, there was an old movie that came out in, I think, the 90s that had Donald Sutherland in it called The Puppet Masters. It's a really great movie about a kind of an unorthodox alien invasion, and it's about how Donald Sutherland plays the head of this federal agency that actually counters it. And it's not Independence Day type counter. It's where they mobilize forces, and it's an incredibly great movie. It's based off a book by Robert Heinlein, which is amazing, and I think Robert Heinlein wrote it in the 50s. But anyway, The Puppet Masters is you can get it on Netflix. I think I bought it for like $5, and it's a great movie. So look at that one for inspiration. And then lastly, look at Seven. Yes, Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Seven. Even though there was no occult part in that, the gloomy sense of dread that you see in Seven is definitely present here in Delta Green. So the way that Delta Green approaches, well, why don't they just fly a whole bunch of B-52s over this threat? Why don't they just send a Ohio-class nuclear submarine down to the Deep One city and everything? The way that they carry it is they take the madness that is, and the insanity that is a staple of Lovecraft and of Call of Cthulhu, and they double down on it in this game. This game is all about the fragility of the human mind. As a matter of fact, the characters themselves are doomed, ultimately. The more that they investigate these strange happenings, the more that they oppose the occult, the more they oppose the Cthulhu mythos, the more doomed they become. There are some really cool mechanics that I like that is brand new. This is all self-sustained. This is no longer a source book for Call of Cthulhu. This is its own. It uses this almost the exact same rules as the latest edition of Call of Cthulhu. And there's two things that really separate it out from that. One is the presence of, the character has the presence of like these anchors. So it could be your wife. It could be your old war buddy. It could be your children. It could be a coworker that you feel close to, or it could be just someone down at the coffee shop who has no idea that they're the one thing that keeps you from going over the edge on insanity, just going down and talking to that person every Sunday. So the character makes these up. And when you are in between your missions and you are trying to heal your sanity or your tortured soul from the horrible things that you've found out and whatnot, you use these contacts to kind of help heal your character. And you role play the contacts out, which was really cool. It kind of reminds me of a lot of the side scenes that you'll see in, say, like Tales from the Loop. But you play out these personal interactions. Now, the other thing, too, is that as your character becomes more and goes on more and more of these missions and becomes more and more determined and resistant to these missions, they also start losing each contact has a certain score to it, and you start losing you start losing points in the score. And then you can wind up losing the contact. Your wife could wind up divorcing you. Your 13-year-old son could say, "I hate you and I never want to see you again." The lady at the coffee shop could suddenly become scared of you because you've become so dark. It's such a delicious mechanic. And it helps, it makes it genuinely gloomy and genuinely creepy. And then it also, reminds us about how fragile the human mind is, and the incredible amount of trauma that these agents are being exposed to in, playing facing the occult. The other mechanic that I really thought was cool in this is each weapon, large weapons like a heavy machine gun or a grenade or something like that, it has a lethality rating, and then it's got a normal damage rating. And the thing that's really cool is that in order to keep the game speed, if you know me, I love free league games, and so I like the speed that free league games run. So in order to keep the game going and to not get bogged down in a 20-minute scenario involving 30 seconds of combat, each weapon has a lethality percentage. And when a person gets hit by it, a human-sized person, you go ahead and roll the lethality, and if it rolls a certain amount of the lethality, then it just automatically kills them. So if you're shooting at a human-sized character with an M4 rifle, you got a 556 round that's going at him there. Maybe the lethality of that, I'm just guessing off the top of my head here, I can't remember what it exactly is, but maybe it's 15%, right? So you'd roll the 15%. If you get that 50% or lower, then that NPC would die immediately. If you didn't, then you would just give them normal damage, and they would take a certain amount of hit points damage and things like that. And I really like that mechanic because it covers things like... makes you think about things like headshots or hits to vital areas or things like that. Now, obviously there are some creatures or there are some effects that happen to people that can make them immune to lethality rolls, where you have to do the damage and everything. Sorry. And as you can see from these books, as I'm thumbing through these are absolutely beautifully done. The Agent's Handbook primarily goes through how to play the game. Gives you a little bit of background on it, but it's how combat works, it's all the rules and stuff. Then the Handler's Guide has all of the lore. Almost, if you look at it, it's much thicker, and almost all of this is lore about the history of Delta Green and what happened with Delta Green. So, okay, so like I said earlier, Delta Green is about madness, and it is about disturbing occult storylines. When a lot of games right now are moving towards political correctness, this one runs completely in the opposite direction. And I don't mean that it's done in bad taste. I mean that the story scenarios in this and the backgrounds are so creepy and so disturbing that it is not for the faint of heart. You're not going to get 2 minutes into the stories of these. If you do the little pink card thing and people tap the pink card when they're feeling uncomfortable, That's not going to work for Delta Green. Delta Green is not, like I said, it is not Hellboy. It is not, it's not Men in Black. It is really dark. It is, the mood of it feels like Seven. And that is what is so magnificent about it. I love a good scare. I like being scared out. I like being weirded out, and I like being creeped out, as long as it's not done in poor taste. Obviously, you know, things like torture of animals and children and everything is something that is just sadistic, and nobody wants to see that in their story arcs. But madness and the fragility of, and the insignificance of humankind is a staple in these stories. These stories are not written to kill the characters off per se, but they're not easy walk in the parks. Most of these scenarios cannot be solved by brute force and combat alone. The characters have to think. Now let's talk about the types of characters that you play. Everybody, when they think of this, they're thinking, oh yeah, FBI agent. Okay, yeah, sure. An FBI agent is, obviously, it's going to be a very easy type character. Your character can be anything from, they could work for NASA, they could be an FBI agent, they could be an Army officer, they could work for the Bureau of Land Management. They can also be, so each mission in Delta Green, you have the agents themselves, which are going to be like the CIA agents, the muscle behind the operations. But then you also have kind of like the mission specialists, or they are the brains of the operation. And I will tell you that those characters are really the characters that that really are better equipped to succeed in Delta Green. The forensic pathologist from the state of Utah, that's going to be a excellent character. The Harvard psychologist, you know, who happens to teach at the FBI Academy, that is an amazing character that is going to be very well playable. Those are the type, the xenobiologist. You could be a computer forensic computer forensic specialist. It just depends on, you could, you know, there's a lot of different things that you can do. If you wanted to play what's called a Delta Green friendly, Delta Green has people that they use on their missions in which they haven't completely released, they completely haven't revealed the nature of the super secret organization, or the nature of the full nature of the occult threat. But there may be, like, if you wanted to play a New York City detective, you could play that. You can really play anything, and some of the scenarios that are published actually have like 5 pre-generated characters and everything that you can use. But for your own campaigns, and the characters don't have to be all of the same agency, because what happens is they're formed into cells and they do their own normal duties, and then what happens is when there's a problem where Delta Green needs them, they use their ties in the government to summon them under the guise of some sort of bogus cover-up and what have you, and the players all meet and they activate and they become part of this cell that activates and then goes on mission. And meanwhile, the Delta Green uses its influence to cover them. So, for instance, the DE agent could go down to Colombia to stop a number of cultists from summoning an ancient Mexican god and everything down the, what did I say, Colombia, I'm sorry, an ancient Aztec god. But under the cover story, that when he gets back, he's, we were hunting the cartel. We were tracking down a shipment of cocaine. And so that's kind of how it works with them. Now, a brief history on Delta Green, and I'm running over my normal 20-minute time, but there's a lot to cover in this. So the brief history of Delta Green is that after 1928, when the deep ones had infiltrated the town of Innsmouth, and they sent in the Coast Guard and the United States Navy and the United States Marine and the Treasury Department, and they found that there was this human sacrificial cult that was negotiating with this alien intelligence that was living at the bottom of the sea. Like I said, that was the first time that the United States government became aware of the presence of the supernatural. So they formed, the United States Navy kind of took the helm because these were the first threat. These were the deep ones. So U.S. Naval Intelligence kind of formed a little group that they actually named Delta Green, and would go around and face these worldwide problems. Then World War II entered the fray, and what happened is the Delta Green kind of ran around and opposed any time where the Nazis were trying to get supernatural assistance, and they managed to actually save the world a few times because, of course, the Nazis are willing to do anything in order to win the war, as was Stalin as well. There's really cool stories about, I think, like Delta Green actually killed Hitler like 3 times, and they just keep bringing him back because they faced the Karotechnia, which is the Nazis' version of Delta Green. And then I believe SV-8 is the name of the Russian one, and they actually had to assassinate Stalin because Stalin was, much like Hitler, very interested in the occult, and he had taken some sacred powders and done human sacrifice and things like that to prolong his life, and they wind up actually having to assassinate him, I believe, under Khrushchev's orders, which was kind of rad. Anyway, then after World War II, Delta Green kind of goes through the Cold War era, and they wind up, I believe it's in Vietnam. The Cho-Chos are a very savage group of cannibalistic devil worshippers in Southeast Asia. And so Delta Green, or maybe the United States government, the United States government, maybe with ties to Delta Green, decides that they want to arm the Cho-Chos, and because the Cho-Chos are hunted and they fight with the North Vietnamese. The North Vietnamese obviously want to hunt them down because they're cannibals and worship, are into human sacrifice and things like that. So foolishly, the United States government winds up arming the Cho-Chos, and then the Cho-Chos wind up, I think they wind up almost summoning their god, and the way the lore in the book it reads is once Delta Green figures out what's happened, they have to divert a B-52 strike to wind up wiping out this ruin so that the Cho-Chos don't summon a god and destroy the world. And after that, the Congress finds out about it, and they wind up dissolving Delta Green. And then in the 90s, if you play in the 90s, Delta Green has been dissolved, but the agents continue to operate on their own in secret. So it comes to be like a conspiracy kind of thing. And so they are an illegal conspiracy in the original book here that takes place in the 90s. So the characters are kind of gone rogue because they recognize that these occult forces are not going to stop trying to destroy humanity, so they kind of continue to operate, but in secret. Well, what happens is a government-sanctioned group, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but a government-sanctioned group makes a deal with a supernatural race of beings where they will provide the United States government with technology in exchange for human sacrifices. And so this agency called Majestic 12 oversee that and operate that. And then when certain parts of the U.S. government, obviously Delta Green finds out about it, certain parts of the U.S. government find out about it, and they wind up shutting down Majestic 12. And then what winds up happening is the members of Delta Green who had been in hiding now join, and they go official again, and they join the government, and they call it the program, but they call themselves Delta Green. And then a few of the people do not trust the United States government, and they continue to stay rogue, and they call themselves the Outlaws. Both groups call themselves Delta Green in the year 2016, and both groups are aware of each other, and they kind of have a rivalry, but they're not really enemies per se. But they do definitely work against each other, and there's mistrust between the two of them. What's cool about the game is your players, your group, has to decide, are they going to be members of the program and have government sanction, government backing, high resources, but also greater oversight? Or are they going rogue, and are they going to be part of the outlaws, who are a lot more freedom but a lot less resource and backing and things like that? Much more underground type of operations to them. Either way, the players, whatever they choose, the scenarios are written good enough to where you could, if you have a group that is aligned with the outlaws, if you have a group that's aligned with the program, they're both very playable. It's going to be entirely, but what the ironic thing is both the outlaws and the program refer to themselves as Delta Green. Hence the name of the game has stuck around and whatnot. So I'll end with this too, that the scenarios themselves, so most of the time, if you've watched some of my GM tips and things like that, you'll see that I look at a lot of these adventures are meat and potatoes, and I add a ton of gravy to kind of stylize it, to make it more interesting, to kind of make it more likable to my extent, to creep me out for story development, right? These published scenarios out of the box, they are amazing. They are so incredibly well written. They're disturbing. I actually got nightmares after, not bad nightmares, good scary, like, that startled me nightmares. After reading one of the scenarios, I was absolutely thrilled to wake up in the middle of it. But, I like scary movies, and I like scary books, and I like scary story arcs. I don't like gratuitous violence, and I don't like gratuitous cruelty or anything like that. There still has to be a point to it. There has to be a point that we're trying to see, even if it's a losing battle, if it's a desperate battle like what's going on in Delta Green, there still has to be a theme of good triumphing over evil, or at least holding evil at bay and preventing the world from being destroyed for another 5 years. That still has to be a staple of the themes. In the human spirit has to still be a part of the stories and everything, and that's something that I definitely like to continue in my campaign, even in a dark setting like Delta Green. So these stories, though, they are so well written, they are so well done, and you can buy. I have them in the other room. I'm sorry I didn't bring them out to the table. But you can buy thick hardcover books, which usually have about 5 scenarios in them, or you can buy those old school single scenarios where they're just little booklets and stuff. And like I said, some of the scenarios are written to take any type of characters that you want, and then some of them are specific one-shots. It almost reminds me of the Alien one-shots by Free League, where they have set characters, and it's just kind of like, it's pretty much the characters are going to be doomed, and it's who's going to make it to the end and everything. But they are extremely well written. As a matter of fact, Free League's Alien has very well written scenarios. This game has amazingly written scenarios. And I'll end with one last thing. I have some friends, I have contacts within the government itself. I have friends that operate and work with the government, so I have some personal experience with people that actually work for federal agencies. And these guys did their homework. The entire section that they have appendixes covering all the different federal agencies that you could work for, and these guys really did a great job. I have been wanting to take this to one of my friends in particular who still works for a federal agency, and wanted to show it to her and say, what do you think of this? But she's not a nerd, so I don't know if she would look at me and think I'm really weird, but I'd be very interested to hear what she thinks about this game here. But from the experience that I have with the military, with the way the federal government operates and everything, I am so impressed with the homework that these guys did, and the very serious tone that they gave it and everything. The heroes, the characters are not Will Smith and heroic cowboys and everything. They're going to be that very dark and doomed characters, much like in 7 and whatnot. But anyway, so that is Delta Green. Would I recommend this game? You guys, come on. You guys are better investigators than that. I would wholeheartedly recommend this game. It is amazing. I am thinking about running a one-shot for Halloween. I'm going to stop my Coriolis campaign. We're having a hard time getting that group together. I'm going to run probably a one-shot of this for Halloween. It's kind of like a tradition. I always like to run a scary 1 or 2 shot scenario right around October. So October's coming up. I'll run it. I'll let you guys know how it went. Anyway, so let me know. Oh, and then don't forget, this is, if you buy this set first in the hardcover, right? And then this is on Kickstarter right now, and it is so good. Even if you don't want to play in the 90s, it has such an incredibly rich history, and it is a good read. You can sit and read that, and it's just as a source book, it's so entertaining. Anyway, this is Deeb. Thank you very much for... I just want you guys to know I feel a lot better after talking to you guys after my... daughter gave me such a hard time tonight and everything. So I just heard the front door open behind me. So Mrs. Bland Gaming has just gotten home. So I am going to finish my glass of Chardonnay, which I should have been drinking, but I've been yapping to you guys. And anyway, let me know what you think of Call of Cthulhu, what you think of Delta Green, or what you think of horror games in particular. Again, not for the faint of heart. There's no way you're going to be able to manage expectations and make this... This game is not going to be Delta Green if you try and censor it, change it, or anything like that. So if you do have some sensitive players in your group, steer away from this one. This is definitely disturbing content. It's adult themed, but oh, it's so amazing. It's so great. So turn out the lights, lower the lights, get yourself some Delta Green, get yourself some creepy music, get you something maybe by Cryo Chamber and stuff, and get ready to plunge yourself into madness. And this is Deeb. A little less. I lost a little bit of sanity earlier, gained a little bit back, right, from calming down, talking to you guys, right, but then discussing Delta Green has chipped away at my sanity again. So I'm going to go make a sanity check and spend the rest of the evening with Mrs. Bland Gaming. So thanks for tuning in. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and I will see you people on the interweb.